The Magic Mile delivered an exciting race. We'll tell you who took the win and the big giant piece of lobster. Formula One. Lewis Hamilton may have dominated the race, but he just barely done it. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world, and the latest in all motorsports including IndyCar and Formula E. All right here on Grid Live.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grid Live Poster Race Show. We're excited to have you join us today to recap this weekend's races with the latest news and, of course, the grid ranking. And we're going to start off with NASCAR's Foxwood 301 from the Magic Mile, known as New Hampshire Motor Speedway.
New Hampshire Motor Speedway, site of today's NASCAR race. Of course, NASCAR has been coming here since 1990, so it is a fairly young track compared to some of the tracks such as Daytona, Martinsville, and Bristol. But definitely is one of the more exciting races, especially for the Magic Mile. We saw a lot of good racing. It started off with Aric Almirola taking the pole. Of course, the pole was drawn at random. He has seemed to got a lot of pole positions, but he wasn't up front too long because Brad Keselowski, will be talking a lot about him tonight. He took the lead shortly. Now, the first caution did come out before the competition caution as Kyle Busch essentially hit the wall entering turn 3. You can see the replay right there. The video is courtesy of NASCAR.com. Looked like a right front tire went out, and he hit that third wall really, really hard. So a tough break for Kyle Busch. We know he's been racing really hard trying to get his season going again. Now, one of the big things, of course, New Hampshire, seeing all the racing going on, we know there's the safety barriers. So thankfully, Kyle Busch, he walked away from any injuries. And then, of course, we'll see later on a couple of other big wrecks that had occurred. Now, after we had the competition caution, the battle for the lead between Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, and Ryan Blaney had the fans on their feet. The three of them were passing and racing each other really hard, leapfrogging, bumping, and banging. This was really great racing for New Hampshire. It really got me excited as well. Following the restart, Denny Hamlin was able to get the lead. This was the restart after Jimmy Johnson spun. Jimmy Johnson coming out of turn 2, made some contact with Clint Bowyer, slid to the inside. Thankfully, he did not hit anything and was able to keep going. But definitely, as we saw the race going, we saw at the end, Hamlin, he went on and get the stage win after he took the lead away from Ryan Blaney. Kobe, what do you thought of the race so far, especially that battle for the stage 1 between those three drivers? That was really some great racing out there.
4 words, Joe. Big motor, small blade. Yeah, it had the 750 horsepower package and had lower downforce. I'm sure with the smaller spoiler and all of that, it definitely helped with today's on track product. And today was actually one of the more exciting New Hampshire races that I can remember recently. Yeah, definitely think that it was that there was a lot of good action all throughout the race. And while the finish of the race, might be what some would call anticlimactic, I definitely think that overall that today's race was really good. And especially you mentioned the battle for the stage 1 victory. It was definitely exciting, seeing the drivers being able to pass and not get stuck. It was just like back and forth. Yeah, and it seemed like the dirty air didn't really play a major factor today as we've seen there in the past.
Yeah, dirty air did not seem to play a factor at all. We saw all the drivers being able to pass each other, and then tire management, which we're going to talk a lot about in this episode, because it definitely seemed as the runs went longer and longer, you saw drivers come towards the front and some fall towards the back. Now, of course, stage 2 pretty much was an uneventful stage until we then got a small rain shower. This rain shower, of course, brought out the yellow flag. Thankfully, no red flag. I know it seems this year, especially when it comes to rain and lightning, we've had a lot of rain, a lot of red flags. So thankfully, we did not have any of that occur. But in the second round of Brad Keselowski versus Denny Hamlin, it was, again, the two of them getting really good racing. Then we saw essentially Christopher Bell, who was having a really good run that day. His right rear tire went out. He spun around, brought out the caution. He was running in 6th place. A lot of folks saw him as an upset winner today because he's so good at New Hampshire. We had this 2-lap shootout. Denny Hamlin had the lead. Keselowski was right there, and coming out of turn 4, Keselowski got Denny Hamlin right on the line to win stage 2. Now, stage 3, this was something that was really interesting. This is where it seems the Chevrolet seemed to come alive. William Byron, he got up as high as 4th place. Prior to this third stage, we did not see Chevrolets anywhere in the top 10. So it was really interesting to see the Chevrolets start coming up. But then we saw Matt Kenseth. He hit the wall. He brought out a caution flag. This while we saw several teams, including Kevin Harvick, Ryan Blaney, they made us stop for tires and fuel. This was lap 214. In total, we had 301 laps at the Magic Mile. Eventually, we then saw a couple more cautions from Matt Kenseth. And after the third time when he brought out the caution, he was done for the day. He hit that wall entering turn 3 really hard. Not too much longer later, John Hunter Nemechek also caused a caution with a hard hit. Again, looked like the tire went down, but he went straight towards that third wall on turn 3. Now, during the day, NBC Sports paid a short tribute to Bob Baer, the previous owner of New Hampshire Motor Speedway. One story that stood out about his character being so friendly, personal, and caring about everyone was a story that came out from 2000.
Yeah, and with all the hard hits we saw today entering turn 3, for some fans, it was definitely a grim reminder of Kenny Irwin Jr. and Adam Petty, who both were lost when they hit the turn 3 wall. And after Adam Petty passed, it was Bob that made the tough phone call to Kyle Petty, calling a grieving father who had just lost his son at the facility you own really speaks volume. And you can learn more about Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin, and Tony Roper by watching the 3 Before February documentary on Brock Beard's YouTube channel, and we have the link provided in the video description on YouTube.
Definitely was a great reminder. I remember that year, especially at New Hampshire, when unfortunately we lost both Adam and Kenny Irwin. Thankfully, with the safer barrier, we saw all the drivers, including John Hunter Nemechek, who was the last driver to hit that wall really hard, able to walk away. They all had to do the mandatory medical center evaluation, which NASCAR requires, and we discussed about in our last episode of Grid Tonight. The lead again continued on between Denny Hamlin, Brad Kosovsky. Brad Kosovsky did take the lead, and this time it went for good. There was no late cautions in the race, and at the end, Brad Kosovsky did take the win. So looking at the top 10 finishers for the NASCAR, Foxwood, 301, Brad Kosovsky, Denny Hamlin. Martin Truex Jr., he rebounded after a pit road penalty for a loose tire. Joey Logano was able to hold off Kevin Harvick, who had slightly fresher tires. Matt Benedetto, we talked about him in or out for the top 16. Great performance. Eric Almirola, Mr. Top 10, he continues history. Cole Custer, Chase Elliott, and Tyler Reddick round up your top 10 finishers in today's race. Now, we will have more NASCAR coverage in the program, but now we'll talk a little bit about another race that occurred and some news that came out during this weekend.
Yeah. Yesterday, the NTT IndyCar Series announced the Mid-Ohio doubleheader scheduled for August 7th through 9th has been postponed to either September or October. This in response to the increased number of virus cases in the area that is caused, by the pandemic. And the Hyundai Indy 200 became a doubleheader after Laguna Seca and Portland races were canceled this past week. And IndyCar has the entire month of September off. Most assume the race will be rescheduled for September. However, if for some reason, they're unable to, only 6 races would remain. And Joe, the Indianapolis 500 is a double points event. Do you think this could be the best chance for all the others to catch up to Scott Dixon?
Yes, especially Scott Dixon. He won last year at Mid-Ohio. He was clearly a favorite going into Mid-Ohio. And quite possibly he could have easily swept Mid-Ohio. Well, we're not going to Mid-Ohio next week. IndyCar's off, so next race is going to be the Indianapolis 500. Yes, Scott Dixon has won that race, but this is the one race everybody has circled. This is the one race they're not just going for a top 20, top 10 finish. They're all going for the win. So it's going to be really hard for anybody to try to catch up to Scott Dixon when it comes to Mid-Ohio, but definitely at the Indianapolis 500, I think there's going to be a lot of potential, and we're going to really see what happens at IndyCar season going forward. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I know, Cody, do you have anything thing in response to the change with the IndyCar season?
Well, this is really unfortunate, but it was for the best. The number of virus cases were definitely going up in the state of Ohio, and it was just the best, the best thing that you could do for a time being. Hopefully, later in the year we can still get the Mid Ohio race on, but look on the bright side, it gives the next race is the Indianapolis 500. We're gonna have practice and qualifying, then the race, and there's no more races. Between now and the Indy 500. So it's going to give those teams, some drivers, time to rest and make sure they're ready for the greatest spectacle in racing, because like nothing else but the Indy 500, that definitely has to be the main focus at this point. And looking at Scott Dixon's big championship lead right now, I think that this could be a major opportunity for some other drivers to get back in the championship hunt. Especially if Scott Dixon had some misfortune in the Indy 500 and finishes, close to the bottom where he's going to get minimum points, or even worst case scenario, if we have more than 33 entries and Scott Dixon somehow gets bumped from the field, and not going to score any points, that would definitely, the championship would be wide open then. And now switching gears, to Formula One, the British Grand Prix today at Silverstone was expected to be a potential Mercedes battle for the win, but it started with a lot of action as two safety car periods happened before lap 15. And Racing Point, who many said is a third best car, had issues, and they didn't look like the third best team today at all. Nico Hulkenberg race was over before it even got started. Really unfortunate incident. As they experienced mechanical issues, and it didn't even allow him to exit the garage. And Lance Stroll started the race in sixth, but fell down to eighth after having a not so good start. And the first safety car came out on lap 2, and Kevin Magnussen came down on Alex Albon as they were completing the first lap. The race stewards did announce an investigation into the incident. Down on lap 13, Danny Hamlin appeared to have a right rear tire go down and spun, hitting the outside wall really hard. And thankfully, he was okay. But obviously upset with the crash, as he was in 11th and left 17 cars running right here. Have a replay of the incident. Yeah, that was definitely a massive shot right there. Yeah, we were very happy to see Danny Hamlin climb out of the car, and now after that, everyone pitted except Roman Grosjean and the sole Haas left, and once again went green. Lewis Hamilton was in control of the race. Then McLaren's moved up to 5th and 6th, making it clear that they were the best of the rest today. And going back to Lance Stroll, he really struggled today, lingering around 8th, 9th, and 10th positions during the first half of the race. And halfway through the race, Racing Point not looking good at all. Joe, is this the kink in their armor, or a missed setup for the race, considering Leclerc, McLaren, and Renault were ahead of them?
It seemed like this may have been like sort of the moment where it's like, okay, Racing Point is not exactly the third best car out there. We know Ferrari has their problems this year. But Leclerc, especially in this track where there was a lot of high-speed corners, he was doing really well in 4th place most of the day, because we had the two Mercedes, the Red Bull, and him up there. Lance Stroll started 6th, and he just sort of fell back. Looked like maybe it was a missed strategy, or maybe it was a case where, with everything not going on, Sergio Perez being out, the team rushing to get Nico Hulkenberg, maybe they just weren't focused and they were not on the A game. But a lot of people are suspecting, well, they're showing that they are beatable, Racing Point. So they might be part of that big battle between Ferrari, McLaren, and Renault. Daniel Ricciardo, Esteban Ocon, both of them put on great performances, and they really brought the fight to Racing Point. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens going forward with the team.
Yeah, and the second half of the race was essentially a runaway performance for Mercedes, leaving Max Verstappen in third, miles away from McLaren and the McLaren drivers. But Alex Albon did serve his 5-second time penalty and stopped for the medium tire compound. Sebastian Vettel really struggled today, and he was overtaken by Pierre Gasly for 10th place, putting him outside of the points. And then tire management became an issue At first, Kimi Räikkönen had an issue. Lance Stroll continued to fall as Pierre Gasly got around Stroll to put him in 10th. Then Daniel Ricciardo caught up to the McLarens, which will be driving for next year. Then Valtteri Bottas' left front tire went down as Max Verstappen slid into second place. And then Carlos Sainz on the last lap had a front left tire go down, just really, really, really crazy British Grand Prix. And then, the most shocking thing of all, Lewis Hamilton, who was leading the race, had his left front tire go down on the final lap, coming towards the checkered flag. And Max Verstappen, who was on fresher tires, was catching up to him, but it was too little too late as Lewis Hamilton won the British Grand Prix on 3 tires. And next, going to look at the top 10 finishers from today's British Grand Prix. Crazy finish. Lewis Hamilton won another Formula One Grand Prix, especially at his home track at Silverstone. And then Max Verstappen, second on the podium, didn't have enough time to catch Lewis Hamilton. Charles Leclerc, last spot on the podium. Impressive fourth place result for Daniel Ricciardo and Renault. Lando Norris rounds out the top 5. And 6th, they have Esteban Ocon, another Renault. 7th, Pierre Gasly, very impressive drive by the AlphaTauri pilot. And then Alex Albon 8, Lance Stroll 9, and Sebastian Vettel claims 1 point in 10th. And the record books will show another win for Lewis Hamilton from Poland, leading all the laps. But what a race that was, Joe! Really crazy. What do you think of the finish? And do you think Max should have stayed out and not pitted?
It was a really exciting finish. I know, seeing social media after the race, everybody was just buzzing about it. One of the key terms I kept hearing was "what a finish, what a race." Of course, we all know DW had said that, but this race again, it just seems like Mercedes has the car. They could have easily had this 1-2, but it just seems like they're not exactly perfect. And sure enough, we saw the tires go down, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. As for Max, Red Bull, he was racing hard to try to catch Valtteri Bottas, especially once they learned Valtteri was starting to have a vibration and his tires were blistering. This could have been easily the chance had he stayed out. Maybe one of his tires would have suddenly degraded and then gone out, causing the top 3 to all have issues. I know when they talked to Max after race, Max did radio to his team, letting them know, hey, the front tire is really starting to go, conditions are starting to go down. The team decided to pit him after Bottas had his tire problem. Of course, Max was so far ahead of Leclerc, no risk there. And there was just no indication that Lewis would blow a tire. I think there was some sort of indication like, hey, Lewis has a really high probability of blowing a tire. Let's keep him out there. Take it easy, Max, because he could have gotten that win. But it seemed like overall Max, they just all accepted the fact that it was just one of those racing deals where had he stayed out, maybe they could have won. But same time, he was pushing hard. It could have easily gone him blowing a tire as well.
And next weekend we're going to be returning to Silverstone for the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. All of the tires are going to be softer next weekend. What do you think that will do, to the on-track product if we see similar weather conditions as we did today?
It's going to make it really interesting. So for folks not too familiar, what's going to happen, all the tire compounds, the soft, medium, hard, they're all going to be one bit softer next week. This is made so that way teams can just use the exact same strategy. Now, of course, today with the 2 safety cars, we saw a lot of teams go on a one-stop strategy. The hard tires was supposed to last beyond 40 laps. We saw a lot of tires did not make it. A lot of questions, was it because of debris on the track from when Kimi Räikkönen went out? Or was it a tire failure with the heat, even though it wasn't the hottest day of the weekend? Still, a lot of folks are also wondering about the setup because it was a lot of times the left front. And of course, that tire gets a lot of pressure at Silverstone with those high-speed corners. Already, Pirelli said they're going to investigate what happened and try to have an answer within 48 hours. If they found an answer where it was maybe something like debris and nothing significant, I still think when we see the softer tires next week all around, this is going to mean more pit stops. Trying to push a one-stop strategy is not going to work. You're going to have to do 2 pit stops. Maybe you can even do 3. If you just work everything right, it's just going to be really dependent on how the weather and everything turns out next weekend at Silverstone.
Yeah, next we're gonna take a look at the current Formula One point standings. Yeah, you see, Lewis Hamilton has 88 points, 3 wins, 3 podiums, sitting really pretty right now. And then Valtteri Bottas 30 points behind. Then we have Max Verstappen in third, and basically right now, I think Lewis Hamilton's only true threats for the championship, might be his teammate Valtteri Bottas or even Max Verstappen if Red Bull can get, not keep knocking off some podium, maybe have Lewis Hamilton have some bad luck or whatever. But Lewis Hamilton is Lewis Hamilton, and he hardly ever has a bad race. And also looking down at the rest of the order, Lando Norris is fourth. I think Lando Norris and down right now, is not looking good at all. And Charles Leclerc is fifth, and Alex Albon sixth. Seventh, Sergio Perez, who missed today's race. Eighth, Lance Stroll. Ninth, Daniel Ricciardo, and 10th, Carlos Sainz. Said, and Joe, I have a question for you after looking at the current standings. Like, what are your thoughts? That we're a few races into the Formula One season now, and Sebastian Vettel's not even in the top 10.
It's unbelievable. A lot of folks, especially including myself, I would say, thought, okay, Phelps is not going to have a great year with Ferrari. He's on his way out, sort of a lame duck situation. Never thought I thought it would be something like this. I think this is just really beyond belief that by contract, he is the number one driver. I seem to have shifted a little bit after Spa when Leclerc got his win last year, but still, he's the number one. It really just seems like they're just not, the chemistry is not there. He just struggled with the tire temperatures. There was nowhere. Of course, we all know what happened in Austria going out on the first lap. You just don't seem to have it working together. And I just think it's not going to be a great year. And I cannot recall any time a number one driver on the contract was having such a dismal season compared to the number two driver. It just, it amazes me.
Yes, this is really crazy. Like you said, I thought it was just gonna be a lame duck year for Sebastian Vettel. I thought, he'd still be finishing up there in the points and all, not necessarily, taking the fight to Mercedes, but I thought, like, hey, the Ferrari's not as good this season as it has been in recent years. So I thought, hey, he was just gonna maximize the car, and that'll be it. And then I'd be like, goodbye. I'm moving on to my next deal in motorsports or wherever that is. But it's just really like if you had like told me like 5, 6, 7 years ago that Sebastian Vettel, wouldn't even be in the top 10 in the Formula One point standings the driver standings at this point, I would totally be shocked because everything that Sebastian Vettel has accomplished in Formula One, and no matter what happens here on forward, Sebastian Vettel's still going to be known as one of the all time greats of Formula One, and it's just really unfortunate to see a driver with his resume struggle so much.
Yeah, he just seems to be really struggling. It just amazes me that this is happening for him and Ferrari. Of course, we know Ferrari doesn't have the greatest car, but still, Charles Leclerc, fourth place all day, got a third place. I think a lot of folks are anticipating more from Vettel, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens for the remainder of the season, and if he could finally get things turned around, or if he's just going to continue being sort of the second Ferrari on the grid. Now, one of the more interesting stories that came out Saturday morning, social media got wind of an odd situation in which Alex Lab was participating in the Sports Car Club of America SCCA test session at the Daytona Road Course. When NASCAR was informed of this situation, it turned out that he had completed around 7 laps in an Xfinity car. Some say it was a steel body car. A lot of folks on social media are looking at pictures, whether it was, but it was an Xfinity car. NASCAR officials got him off the track. No word yet on Alex facing penalties. DGM Racing said they did not break any protocol according to the rules, participating in a test session, Sports Car Club of America. And as soon as they heard that NASCAR was not happy with them, they went ahead and stopped. Meanwhile, Chase Briscoe was participating in the IMSA race at Road America this weekend, which the Xfinity Series is going to be racing at the following weekend. Now, NASCAR, of course, has been very adamant about not running practice or qualifying sessions for the top 3 series and limiting track practice especially the Daytona road course. Does this seem like to be a lack of consistency on NASCAR's part with this situation with Alex, the sports car club, and Chase at the IMSA event? Or is this really two similar but different circumstances?
Well, Joe, I'm just gonna say this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we, agree or disagree with the rules that NASCAR, put in place, where they don't want you testing on the Daytona road course beforehand. They're only gonna let a driver run in one event. They can't like do double duty, triple duty, or quadruple duty with the ARCA race. They just have to pick one series and stick to it. And NASCAR, with testing and stuff, this really, they don't really do that nowadays. And Alex Labay, he clearly broke the rules. And after looking at several of the photos online that I saw of that stock car, it was clearly a stock car. It was clearly an Xfinity car. I know some people said it was a still body car, but another Twitter user who was at the test provided a closer up image, like the rear of the car, and it definitely looked like it was not a still car. It looked like it was a composite body, but I don't know for sure. And if it's a composite body, it's obviously a modern Xfinity car. Taking laps in the Daytona road course. At his test session that Alex Labay had no business driving a NASCAR Xfinity stock car at, and that's definitely breaking the rules. And the situation with Chase Briscoe, he was driving a Ford Mustang GT4 in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge series, and that's not a NASCAR Xfinity car. It's a GT4 spec sports car, and Chase Briscoe is getting extra experience. Not necessarily experience and all that, but still experience. But still getting the track time when Xfinity is not going to have a practice session next weekend at Road America. So Briscoe's definitely going to have that track time while a lot of the other competitors won't. I'm sure we might have some IMSA drivers who competed today or in yesterday's pilot challenge race in the Xfinity race as well. Now we're going to have Andy Lally driving for our motorsports. Yeah, they'll definitely have some track time, while the others, might just have to do that on iRacing. And I think the difference between these two scenarios is the fact that Alex Labay drove a NASCAR Xfinity Series stock car at a test session, and it just goes against the rules, and NASCAR doesn't want them, having any track time on the road course prior to that because they want an even playing field. But it seems like they're gonna be able to do it virtually on iRacing because they're gonna scan and add the new chicane so the drivers can be able to have some virtual practice before they get there for the real thing.
Yeah, bringing up a good point, especially with the Xfinity car at Daytona and the difference in car Chase Briscoe had now. One follow-up question about the Road America. Of course, you were covering that race. We saw a lot of rain. Would experience racing in the rain, if Chase Briscoe did get any, would that be any advantage for him? Just in the event there is rain at the Xfinity Series race at Road America.
I said, well, Chase Briscoe competing yesterday's IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge race, and that race saw no rain at all. It was just today's IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship race, which saw rain. And I'm sure if it rains next week at Road America, the next Xfinity race, one driver who might benefit is Andy Lally, who I mentioned going to be driving for our Motorsports, the number 02 car that's been driven for most of the season by Brett Moffitt. Yeah, Andy Lally is a well accomplished road racer. And I'm sure even without being in the rain today, I'm sure he would definitely do well anyways because he's just an excellent road racer. And yeah, any experience you can get in the rain in any car should help out.
Definitely, Andy Lally is going to be somebody to watch. And of course, weather, that's always a factor in every race. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next weekend when the Xfinity Series does go to Road America. Shifting gears over to the SuperCar Series, the Virgin Australian SuperCar Series Triple Crown at Darwin is still a go as of now. Virus hotspots are popping up. causing teams to move to avoid travel restriction and border closures. This includes the series points leader Scott McLaughlin and his team left Brisbane after it was declared a virus hotspot. We will be following this story throughout the week and have an update on Grid Tonight on Wednesday. Now, going back to the NASCAR race at the Magic Mile, we saw Brad Kosovsky earn the win today. It was really between him and Denny Hamlin all day long. Yeah, we saw Ryan Blaney up there a little bit, but Ryan Blaney just seemed to have it where his car wasn't there, and then, of course, some bad luck with coming into pits just as the caution flag was coming out. Is Brad Kosovsky up there with Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin for discussion of at least the big three going into the championship?
Well, I don't. I'm not really sure if I'd put Brad Keselowski on the same level as Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin right now, but I think Brad is a step below and knocking right on the door. Brad Keselowski and Jeremy Bullins proven to be a great duo. I'm gonna say, when Jeremy Bullins was with Ryan Blaney, that pair received some criticism as well. Everybody, was blaming Jeremy Bullins for all of the pedophiles of Blaney and all of that. And people saw, when Penske swapped around the crew chiefs, they thought, with Jeremy Bullins heading over to Brad Keselowski, people thought that Brad was, getting the short end of the stick. But Jeremy Bullins and Keselowski are proving that they might definitely be a potent duo, for however long they continue working together. But for right now, they seem to be working together pretty well.
They seem to be working really well together. It's interesting because there's some races where they seem like they're the team to beat. Other events, they just don't seem like they're really there, hovering around the top 20. But today, they really, as Brad Keselowski said, they needed to dominate the race, and they sure did. But, of course, they still had to fight off a hard charge in Denny Hamlin. Taking a look at the playoff bubble going out of the race, again, 60 points maximum number of points per event, and William Byron extended his advantage ahead of Tyler Reddick, despite finishing one spot behind. That's mainly in part because of the stage points Byron earned today. As you can see, Eric Jones, Jimmy Johnson spots. So now Eric Jones, he is 31 points out of the playoff picture. Is Eric Jones now in a spot where going into Michigan and the remaining race, he's in a must-win situation?
Well, I mean, it's definitely possible that he could still point his way in, but I know our viewers feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But winning a race would take all of your worries away, and going to Michigan, Eric Jones's home track, he's gonna, since the doubleheader weekend, Eric Jones will have 2 races at Michigan to capitalize and try to secure his spot in the playoffs. But right now, if I'm Eric Jones, I'm definitely starting to get a little worried.
Definitely a little worried, especially Michigan. We got a doubleheader, as you mentioned, 2 race weekends up there. One person, not exactly worried yet, but it has to be Kyle Busch. He had over 100 points over the cut line. Now just 94 points. With the 60 points from one race and then another bad race, one bad weekend in Michigan could really put him down and put him in a really bad spot. Do you see Michigan being a racetrack where Kyle Busch could bounce back and try to win, or at least finish in the top 10?
Well, the way things have been going lately with this team, I'm not sure if I feel confident saying that Kyle Busch is gonna win on the Michigan race 1 or Michigan race 2, but it's definitely a place where he can go out and have a good finish, especially after today's disappointing last place finish at Loudon.
Very disappointing last place finish. It's going to be really interesting to see how that team rebounds back. As you mentioned, they don't seem to be firing all cylinders. It just seems like thing after thing, they're just not getting there. Now, one of the big stories coming out this morning, and this is the person that is 20th in the points, is Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace is 118 points away from the cut line. Probably looking at a must-win situation, or the others having bad luck, or the Petty Enterprise team scoring some top 10 finishes. But the big news that came out is he's been offered some ownership stock role with the 43 team. Of course, he's in negotiations for next year. There's been rumors of him with the 43, 48, this week even the 42. when it comes to negotiation, is having a small piece of ownership in a NASCAR team a good thing for a race car driver?
I mean, Joe, it can be or it can be a bad thing, but yeah, it was some really crazy news today. Hearing that Bubba Wallace has been offered, like a partial role in ownership with Richard Petty Motorsports. I mean, if Bubba Wallace does eventually accept that offer and becomes one of the owners of Richard Petty Motorsports, that's definitely showing commitment to that team and organization. And until like if he decided to sell his share later on, he'd just be stuck with the organization, for better or worse. And when you're in that situation, you're pretty much going to be tied to that team, and that would definitely prove, that hey, Bubba Wallace is going to be the driver of the number 43 car for the foreseeable future, and nobody else is taking that ride. But yeah, it could be a good thing. Could try to build that program back up over the years and try to take the Richard Petty name back to his glory days in that 43 car, Bubba Wallace behind the wheel, or if the team doesn't, improve, get better, or in worst case regress. That it could be a tough situation for Bubba Wallace to get out of if other rides did come open.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. You bring up some really great points about if that team really progresses, and they seem to be overall progressing this year. Sponsors are interested in Bubba Wallace. The team has been running really good compared to past seasons. If they can really build up more and more rally around Bubba Wallace, to have that security there, he could really focus on racing. I think Bubba Wallace said to Matt Snyder, one of the comments that Matt Snyder reported during the race was, if he could have an announcement before January about where he's racing next year, that's the earliest in his career. That has to be a huge confidence boost. If we're midway through August, you announce where you're racing next year, you got a great deal. You could really just focus on going out there racing and just trying to get everything better for next year. So it's going to be really interesting to see how everything turns out for all our fans. Be sure to tune in. Grid tonight on Wednesdays. There'll be a special program on Formula E, the latest news, including any news development with Bubba Wallace's silly season and everything going on.
Yeah, and on Tuesday, please join us for Formula E coverage as we preview the week-long extravaganza of Formula E Fest, a whopping 9 days, 6 races, 3 different courses, and at the end, ultimately, we will crown one champion. And yesterday, we had the great privilege of welcoming Jack from Formula E Zone, as we'll be working with him and the entire Formula E Zone team as we will be having Formula E coverage all week, and we will start at noon Eastern time on Tuesday as we preview the road to crowning the Formula E champion, and we invite you to join us in on all the fun.
Definitely join us in all the fun, and of course, don't forget, fans, pick a winner. I know Kobe and Jack, they both picked Lewis Hamilton to win the Formula One race, so now that puts you at 9 points in the pick winner stand, just one away from 10. So it's going to be really interesting. Speaking about 10, let's take a look at your grid ranking top 10 after this race weekend. Fabio Quartararo, still number 1, but Lewis Hamilton, he is now second, 20 points. He is really closing in. Scott McLaughlin, Scott Dixon didn't run this weekend, but Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin did. They both gained a little bit of points as well. And then, of course, towards the bottom, there we see Antonio Felix da Costa in 8th place, Formula E. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Some great races could really elevate him. But if he has some inconsistent runs and some poor races, you could really see him fall and another person in the top 10. So be sure to follow gridranking.com or the Grid at Twitter. You can find both our Twitter accounts, Grid Ranking and Grid World Motorsport League, on our website. And definitely we'll be following everything, especially looking at everything going on. We got next week Formula One, Formula E Fest, MotoGP, NASCAR doubleheader, and the SuperCars series.
Yeah, we want to thank you all for watching tonight. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for Rookie Stripes, the introduction to racing flags. And on Tuesday, as we mentioned, we will kick off Formula E Fest. Definitely going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to have the Formula E Zone team joining us next week for this historic event. For Joe Samniego, I'm Kobe Lambert from the podiumfinish.net. Thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful night.